I told my family we need to downsize our lifestyle if they want me to pay their mortgage. Then I returned home to find the locks replaced and my bags thrown outside. Think about your behavior. I thought and decided to do it. Well, let's go. So there I was, living my best life at 28. My name's Anita, and honestly, things were going pretty well for me back then. I had this decent job at a big company, nothing fancy, but it paid the bills and then some. I was making good money, enough to rent a nice little apartment downtown and still have cash left over for the things I wanted. I'd been dreaming about buying my own place for months. You know how it is. Tired of throwing money away on rent every month when I could be building equity in something that's actually mine. So I opened up this savings account specifically for my future home. Every month, I'd dump whatever I could spare into that account. Watching those numbers grow felt amazing. I was actually getting somewhere, you know? My apartment wasn't huge, but it was mine. Well, not really mine since I was renting, but you get what I mean. I could come home after work, kick off my shoes, order takeout if I didn't feel like cooking, and nobody bothered me. It was peaceful. I had my routine down, work during the week, maybe go out with friends on weekends, catch up on Netflix shows, whatever I wanted. Life felt stable for the first time in years. I wasn't stressed about money constantly like I used to be when I was younger. I could actually plan for the future instead of just surviving paycheck to paycheck. The savings account was proof of that. Every deposit felt like I was getting closer to something real. Then my mom called. It was a Tuesday evening, I remember, because I was watching this cooking show and thinking about what to make for dinner. When I saw her name on my phone, I almost didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to talk to her, but because she usually called on weekends. A Tuesday call felt different somehow. "Anita, honey, we need to talk," she said as soon as I picked up. Her voice sounded weird. Shaky, like she'd been crying or was about to start. "What's wrong, Mom?" I asked, muting the TV. "Can you come over tonight? Your father and I need to discuss something important with you." I knew I wasn't going to get more out of her over the phone, so I grabbed my keys and drove to my parents' house. It's about 20 minutes from my apartment, in this suburban neighborhood where I grew up. Nothing fancy, but it's a nice area with decent houses and good schools. When I walked in, both my parents were sitting at the kitchen table. Mom's eyes were red and puffy, and Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years since I last saw him a few weeks ago. There were tissues scattered on the table and 2 empty coffee mugs. "Sit down, sweetheart," Mom said, gesturing to the chair across from them. I sat down, feeling more nervous by the second. "Okay, what's going on?" "You're scaring me." Dad cleared his throat and looked down at his hands. "I'm getting laid off from work." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My dad had worked at the same manufacturing plant for almost 20 years. He was reliable, showed up every day, never caused problems. How could they just get rid of him? "What? When? Why?" I stammered. "End of next month," he said quietly. "They're closing our whole department, moving operations overseas where it's cheaper. 47 people are losing their jobs." Mom reached over and grabbed his hand. "That's not all, honey." I looked at her, dreading whatever was coming next. "I've been having these health issues," she continued. "My back pain has gotten so much worse, and the doctor says I need to reduce my hours at work. I can't do full shifts at the restaurant anymore. Some days I can barely stand for more than a few hours." I felt like the room was spinning. Both my parents losing income at the same time? What about unemployment benefits? And can't the doctor help with your back? Dad shook his head. "Unemployment won't cover nearly enough. And your mother's been seeing doctors for months. They say she needs surgery, but even with insurance, we can't afford it right now. We're behind on the mortgage payments already," Mom added, her voice breaking, 2 months behind. "If we can't catch up soon, we could lose the house. The house I grew up in, the house they've been paying on for 15 years. The thought of them losing it made me feel sick." "How much do you need?" I asked, even though I was pretty sure I didn't want to know the answer. $1,800 a month just for the mortgage," Dad said. "Plus utilities, groceries, Mom's medical bills. $1,800, that was more than half my monthly take-home pay." But looking at their faces, my parents who had raised me, fed me, supported me through college, I couldn't say no. "Okay," I heard myself saying, "I'll help with the mortgage. Just temporarily until Dad finds another job and Mom gets better." The relief on their faces was immediate. Mom started crying again, but these were happy tears. Dad stood up and hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "Thank you, baby girl," he whispered. "We'll pay you back as soon as we can get back on our feet." I nodded, but inside I was already doing the math. $1,800 for their mortgage, plus my own rent, plus all my other expenses. My savings account was going to stop growing. Actually, I'd probably have to dip into it just to make ends meet. But they were my parents. Family helps family, right? That's what I told myself as I wrote them a check that night for the first mortgage payment. The first few months of helping my parents were brutal. What started as just the $1,800 mortgage payment quickly turned into a money pit. Their water heater died, then the refrigerator started acting up, then the roof leaked during a storm. Every few weeks there was another emergency, another expense that fell on my shoulders. Dad finally found work as a security guard at a local grocery store, but it was minimum wage night shifts, basically pocket change compared to what he used to make at the plant. Mom's back kept getting worse, and she could barely work half shifts at the restaurant anymore. Some days she'd come home crying from the pain. After 4 months of this, I was drowning. I'd already blown through $10,000 of my savings and was dipping into what was left just to cover my own rent and basic expenses. I couldn't keep living in my apartment and supporting them at the same time. When my parents suggested I move back home temporarily to save on rent, I knew I didn't have a choice. Just temporarily, Mom had said, until we get back on our feet. So there I was at 28, moving back into my childhood bedroom like some kind of failure. I kept telling myself it was temporary, just until they got back on their feet. My parents were actually pretty grateful about the whole arrangement. Mom cooked dinner every night, and I have to admit, it was nice coming home after work and not having to think about what to eat. For about 2 months, we had a decent routine going. I was fully supporting the family financially, but at least I wasn't hemorrhaging money on rent anymore. Dad worked his security job. Mom did what she could at the restaurant, and I covered everything else. It wasn't ideal, but it was manageable. Then I came home from work one day and saw suitcases in the living room. My older brother Jake was sitting on the couch with his wife Sarah and their 3-year-old son Tommy. I hadn't seen them in months since they lived about 2 hours away in another city. Jake looked embarrassed, Sarah looked annoyed, and Tommy was running around the room like a maniac. "What's going on?" I asked, looking at all the luggage. Jake rubbed his neck. "I got laid off last week. We couldn't make rent, so we're going to stay here for a while until I find something else." My parents were practically glowing with excitement about having their grandson in the house. They immediately asked me to move into the smaller guest room so Jake's family could have my bigger room. Because apparently having a toddler meant they needed more space than the person who was paying all the bills. Life got chaotic real fast. Tommy cried constantly, especially at night. The kid had some serious sleep issues, and the walls in that house were thin. I was getting maybe 4 hours of sleep a night, then dragging myself to work the next day feeling like garbage. Jake spent his days half-heartedly looking for work while Sarah complained about everything. The house was too small, the neighborhood was boring, there wasn't enough hot water for everyone to shower. Meanwhile, I was getting requests for more money because now there were 7 people living in the house instead of 4. "We're going to need more for groceries now," Mom told me one morning. "With 7 people, the food budget is getting tight." I did the math one night and realized my entire monthly salary was going to support the family. Every single penny. My dreams of buying a house were completely dead at this point. At least I still had my $50,000 in savings that I was refusing to touch, but everything else was gone. Jake eventually found a part-time job at some warehouse, but only working mornings. He claimed he was using his afternoons to look for better work, but mostly he and Sarah would go visit friends or hang out at the mall, leaving Tommy with my parents. Then I started noticing Sarah's shopping habits. She'd come home with expensive handbags, new clothes, jewelry, designer stuff that cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. When I asked her about it, she got nasty. "Where did you get the money for that purse?" I asked one day when she walked in with another shopping bag. "That's none of your business," she snapped. "I don't have to explain my purchases to you." That's when I went to Mom and asked how much Jake was contributing to the household expenses. "How much is Jake giving you for rent and food?" I asked her when we were alone in the kitchen. Mom got all uncomfortable and looked away. "Well, he's not really able to contribute right now. His job doesn't pay much, and they have their own expenses." So let me get this straight. I was working full-time and spending my entire paycheck to support 7 people, including Jake's family, while his wife was blowing his salary on luxury items. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I brought it up at dinner one night. "Jake, don't you think you should be contributing something to the household budget?" I said. "I mean, we're all living together, and Sarah's buying expensive stuff while I'm paying for everyone's food." The second I mentioned that maybe Jake should contribute something to the household budget instead of letting his wife spend everything on designer purses, all hell broke loose. Jake started yelling. "You need to mind your own damn business, Anita. What I do with my money is not your concern." Sarah was nodding along. "She's just greedy and obsessed with money. Everything's about dollars and cents with her. I'm the only one bringing money into this house," I shot back. "Of course I care where it goes." My parents, instead of backing me up, actually took their side. They said I was being ungrateful and that helping family was my duty, not something to brag about. Let's all go get some pizza and discuss this like adults, Jake said, standing up from the table. Of course, by they all he meant everyone except me. My parents, Jake and Sarah, all grabbed their coats and headed for the door. They left Tommy behind because apparently a 3-year-old would ruin their nice relaxing dinner conversation. So there I was, alone in the house with a cranky toddler who wasn't even my kid, while the rest of my family went out to eat on my dime and probably complained about how unreasonable I was being. I sat there on the couch, watching Tommy play with his toys, and realized just how screwed up this whole situation had become. I was basically alive in ATM who also provided free babysitting services, and somehow I was the bad guy for asking questions about where the money was going. The next few months were hell. Jake kept his part-time warehouse job but never seemed to actually look for anything better. He and Sarah would disappear for hours, supposedly job hunting, but always came back with shopping bags. Sarah kept buying expensive designer stuff while I paid for everything, the mortgage, utilities, groceries, you name it. December rolled around, and I was completely drained. Working full-time, then coming home to a house full of people who treated me like garbage despite the fact that I was funding their entire existence. One Saturday morning, Mom knocked on my door asking me to come downstairs for a family meeting. Everyone was already in the living room when I got there. We were talking about Christmas vacation plans, Mom said with a fake smile. I almost laughed. What vacation? We can barely afford to keep the electricity on. That's what we wanted to discuss, Dad said. We think the family should take a real vacation this year. Hawaii would be perfect. Hawaii, I stared at them. Are you serious? Sarah leaned forward all excited. There are great deals right now, and it would be amazing for Tommy to see the ocean. How much? I asked, dreading the answer. About $12,000 for all of us, Mom said. We know you have that savings account with $50,000. $12,000 isn't that much compared to what you have saved. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They wanted me to blow my house savings on a family vacation to Hawaii. The money I'd been saving for years before any of this mess started. That money is for buying a house, I said slowly. It's not vacation money. But we're family, Sarah said. Don't you think we deserve a break after this hard year? Hard year? I looked at her. You haven't worked a single day since you moved in here. You spend Jake's paycheck on designer purses while I pay for your food and shelter. Jake's face turned red. There she goes with the money talk again. Yes, the money talk, because I'm the only one who cares about money in this house. I pay for literally everything. That's what family does, Mom said. And now we're asking you to help us make good memories together. The answer is no, I said firmly. I'm not spending my house money on your vacation. Find a way to pay for it yourselves. They all stared at me like I'd slapped them. The room went dead quiet except for Tommy playing with his toys. Think about it, Mom said finally. Christmas is about family. Maybe you'll change your mind. I won't change my mind. I'm already spending every penny I earn on this family. My savings are off limits. I went to my room and slammed the door. I could hear them talking downstairs, probably discussing what a selfish bastard I was for not wanting to fund their dream vacation. That was Saturday. Sunday was tense, with everyone giving me dirty looks and making passive-aggressive comments. I figured they'd get over it eventually and we'd go back to the usual routine of me paying for everything while they complained about my attitude. Monday morning I went to work as usual. It had been a long day, and I was looking forward to getting home, eating Mom's cooking, and maybe watching some TV before bed. At least there were some small benefits to living at home, even if everything else sucked. But when I pulled into the driveway, something looked wrong. There were garbage bags sitting by the front door. As I got closer, I realized they weren't garbage bags, they were my things. My clothes, my books, my personal stuff, all shoved into plastic bags like trash. I tried to put my key in the front door, but it wouldn't turn. They'd changed the locks. I started pounding on the door. What the hell is going on? Open the door. After a few minutes, the door opened but only a crack because of the security chain. Mom's face appeared in the gap, and I could see Dad, Jake, and Sarah standing behind her. What is this? I asked, gesturing to the bags. Why are my things outside? Mom's voice was cold. We decided you need to think about your behavior. You're being selfish and ungrateful, putting money before family. You're kicking me out because I won't pay for your vacation? We're giving you time to think, Dad said from behind her. When you realize that family comes first and you're willing to help us with the Hawaii trip, then we can talk about you coming back. I stared at them through that tiny gap in the door. These people who I'd been supporting for months, who'd been living off my paycheck, were literally throwing me out because I wouldn't raid my savings account for their vacation. You're serious, I said. You're actually kicking me out. Think about what's really important, Mom said. We'll be waiting for you to come to your senses. Then she slammed the door in my face. I stood there for a minute, looking at my belongings scattered around in garbage bags, trying to process what had just happened. My own parents had locked me out of their house because I wouldn't give them $12,000 for a vacation. At first I wanted to cry, then I wanted to pound on the door and scream at them. But then something weird happened. I started to smile. Then I started to laugh. They thought they were punishing me, but they'd actually just done something I'd been too guilty and too stuck in family obligation to do myself. They'd set me free. I loaded all my stuff into my car and drove to my friend Lisa's house. She had a spare room and had always said I could crash there if I needed to. When I showed up with my bags and explained what happened, she just shook her head. "Your family is insane," she said, helping me carry stuff inside. "But honestly, this might be the best thing that could have happened to you." That night, sleeping in Lisa's guest room, I felt better than I had in months. I was free, and it felt amazing. I spent the next few days at Lisa's place, and it was like waking up from a nightmare. No one asking me for money, no crying baby keeping me awake, no passive-aggressive comments about family duty. I could actually think clearly for the first time in months. Lisa had this big house with plenty of space, and she made it clear I could stay as long as I needed. But I didn't want to be a burden on anyone else, so I started apartment hunting right away. It felt weird looking at rental listings again after living at home, but also exciting. I could afford a decent place now that I wasn't supporting 7 people. Within a few days, I found a nice 1-bedroom apartment in a good neighborhood. The rent was reasonable, and I put down a deposit immediately. Moving in was the best feeling ever. My own space again, my own rules, my own life. I could eat what I wanted, watch what I wanted, sleep when I wanted. No one could ask me for money or make me feel guilty for having boundaries. For a whole week, it was blissfully quiet. No phone calls, no texts, nothing from my family. I started to think maybe they'd actually stick to their guns and leave me alone until I came crawling back with my checkbook. Then the mortgage payment was due. My phone rang on a Tuesday morning. Mom's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Anita, honey, it's time for the mortgage payment," she said, like nothing had happened. Like they hadn't just thrown me out of their house a week ago. I started laughing. "Are you serious right now?" "What do you mean?" "The payment is due, and we're expecting the usual amount." "Mom, you kicked me out, you changed the locks and threw my stuff in garbage bags. Why would you think I'm still going to pay your bills?" There was silence on the other end. Then Mom's voice got panicky. "But we don't have the money for the mortgage. You know we can't afford it without your help. You should have thought about that before you decided to punish me for not funding your Hawaiian vacation." "Anita, please, this isn't the time to be petty. We could lose the house. Then maybe Jake should get a full-time job. Or Sarah could stop buying designer handbags and contribute something. You have options, you just don't want to use them." "But Christmas is coming," Mom said, her voice getting softer and more manipulative. "This isn't the time for family to be fighting. We should be together, working things out." "You're right, it's not the time for fighting. So I'm not going to fight with you. I'm just not going to pay your bills anymore either. What if we all sat down and talked about this? You could come back home, and we could start fresh." "Absolutely not. I'm not coming back, and I'm not giving you another cent. You made your choice when you threw me out." Mom was quiet for a long moment. "You can't mean that." "I absolutely mean it. Goodbye, Mom." I hung up and immediately blocked her number. Then I blocked Dad's number, Jake's number, and Sarah's number. I blocked them on social media too. I was done with all of them. They tried calling from different numbers for a while, leaving voicemails and sending texts. All the same guilt-tripping bullshit about family obligations and how selfish I was being. I deleted everything without reading or listening to it. After a few weeks, the calls stopped coming. I guess they finally realized I wasn't going to cave. It's been several months now since I moved out. My life is completely different, and I love it. I'm saving money again, actually saving it, not just watching it disappear into the family money pit. My savings account is growing for the first time in over a year. I hear things through relatives sometimes. Dad and Mom both had to get additional jobs to cover the bills. Dad's working 2 part-time jobs now, and Mom's pushing herself to work more hours despite her back problems. Jake finally got a full-time job because he didn't have a choice anymore. Apparently they complain about me constantly, calling me selfish and ungrateful. But here's the thing. They're not starving. They're not homeless. They figured out how to make it work when they had to. They just preferred having me as their personal ATM because it was easier. My cousin told me they've been bad-mouthing me to the whole extended family, trying to make me look like the villain. Some relatives have reached out to tell me I should reconcile with my parents, that family is more important than money. I just tell them they're welcome to start paying my parents' mortgage if they feel so strongly about it. The funny part is, I'm not even angry anymore. At first, I was curious about how they'd used me and treated me. But now I mostly feel relieved. They did me a huge favor by kicking me out. I never would have had the guts to leave on my own. I was too caught up in guilt and family obligation. I've started dating again, something I couldn't even think about when I was supporting 7 people and living in my childhood bedroom. I'm making plans for the future, looking at houses again. My $50,000 is still sitting there, untouched, earning interest while I add to it every month. Sometimes I wonder if they'll ever apologize or admit they were wrong. But honestly, I don't think I want them back in my life even if they do. They showed me who they really are when they thought they could manipulate and control me with guilt and family pressure. I'm happier now than I've been in years. I have my own place, my own money, my own choices. No one can make me feel guilty for having boundaries or wanting to keep the money I earn. My parents taught me an important lesson, just not the one they intended. They taught me that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who will take advantage of you the worst. And they taught me that I'm stronger than I thought I was.